The exiles return. The void between stars shuddered as reality tore open. A massive portal, swirling with energies beyond human comprehension, birthed a fleet of vessels into the outer reaches of the Sol system. The ships, gleaming constructs of impossible alloys and crystalline structures, moved with unnatural precision, their formations perfect as they adjusted course toward the third planet from the Sun. On the command deck of the flagship Ancestral Right, High Marshal Tarek Vaughn stood motionless, his enhanced eyes studying the holographic projection of Earth. His tall frame, a product of generations of genetic refinement, remained perfectly still. Only the subtle pulsing of the luminescent patterns embedded in his skin betrayed any emotion. 500,000 years, he whispered. We have finally returned to claim our birthright. Commander Sarah Nick's approach, her movements fluid and deliberate. Like all Taurians, her body was a testament to their technological mastery. Augmented strength, enhanced intelligence, and extended lifespans that made their ancestors seem like primitive apes by comparison. Preliminary scans are complete, Marshal, she reported. Earth appears to have recovered from the cataclysm. Biosignatures indicate abundant life, including approximately 9 billion humanoids. Tarek's expression remained unchanged, but his skin patterns flickered with satisfaction. And their technological state? As expected, Sarah replied. Primitive energy signatures consistent with early fusion technology. We detect rudimentary satellite networks and a small habitat on their moon. Nothing that presents a threat. The words hung in the air, carrying the weight of centuries of planning. When the Taurians' ancestors had fled Earth 500,000 years ago, they had done so out of necessity. The cataclysm, a convergence of asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, and resulting climate collapse, had threatened to extinguish humanity. The most advanced among them had built generation ships and departed, vowing to return when Earth had healed and reclaim it with their superior evolution. Begin the approach sequence, Tarek ordered. Maintain stealth protocols until we reach lunar orbit. I want our arrival to be impressive. The fleet accelerated, their drives manipulating gravitational fields to propel them forward without detectable emissions. As they passed the gas giants, Commander Sarah continued monitoring Earth's communications. Marshal, I'm detecting something unusual, she said, her brow furrowing. There appears to be significantly more orbital infrastructure than our initial scan suggested. Tarek joined her at the sensor station. Elaborate. The satellites are using some form of adaptive camouflage. Most appear to be communications or observation platforms, but... She paused, adjusting the scanner parameters. There's a network of larger structures in geosynchronous orbit. Purpose unknown. Military. Tarek asked, his voice betraying a hint of concern. Possibly. They're masking their energy signatures somehow. Tarek considered this information. The ancestral records had predicted that any humans remaining on Earth after the cataclysm would have regressed to a primitive state, requiring millennia to rebuild even basic civilization. Their projections had allowed for basic spaceflight capabilities by now, but nothing sophisticated. Continue approach. Alert me to any changes. As the Taurian fleet crossed Mars' orbit, the first anomaly occurred. A small, unassuming satellite, previously undetected, suddenly activated, emitting a brief pulse of energy before disintegrating. Marshal. Sarah's voice was sharp. We've been scanned. An unknown device just analyzed our fleet composition before self-destructing. Tarek's skin patterns flashed with alarm. Impossible. Their technology shouldn't. He was interrupted by Lieutenant Kerr at Communications. Marshal, we're receiving a transmission. Origin. Earth Military Command. The bridge fell silent. Earth wasn't supposed to have detected them yet, let alone identified them as a military force. On screen, Tarek ordered. A human figure appeared on the main display. A woman with dark skin and silver-streaked hair, wearing a uniform adorned with insignia Tarek didn't recognize. Unidentified fleet approaching Earth space, she stated calmly. This is Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered a restricted zone without authorization. State your identity and purpose immediately." Tarek exchanged glances with Sarah. This wasn't the primitive reception they had anticipated. Nevertheless, he stepped forward, his bearing regal and commanding. "I am High Marshal Tarek Vaughn of the Taurian Ascendancy. We are the descendants of humanity who left Earth 500,000 years ago. We have returned to reclaim our ancestral home and guide you into a new era of prosperity under our enlightened rule." There was a pause, longer than light-speed communication lag would explain, before Admiral Chen responded. "Marshal Vaughn, we have no historical record of any human exodus 500,000 years ago. However, we acknowledge your claim of human ancestry." Her expression remained neutral. "Be advised that Earth is a sovereign planet under the protection of the Sol Confederation. We do not recognize any external claims of authority. You are welcome to establish diplomatic relations, but your current approach vector and formation are recognized as hostile. Adjust course immediately, or we will interpret your actions as an act of war." Tarek's skin patterns flashed with indignation. "These primitives dare to threaten us," he muttered. Commander Sarah stepped closer. "Marshal, I'm detecting energy buildups throughout the Sol system. They're activating defensive systems." "Impossible," Tarek dismissed. "Our ancestral records were clear. Earth's survivors would be barely beyond industrial technology by now." "The records were wrong," Sarah insisted, displaying the sensor data. "They have a defense grid extending from Venus to the asteroid belt, and these energy signatures. I've never seen anything like them." Tarek's confidence wavered. Something had gone terribly wrong with their projections, but they had come too far to turn back now. The Taurians had spent generations preparing for this moment, the triumphant return to reclaim their birthright. "Broadcast on all frequencies," he commanded. "Citizens of Earth, we are your evolutionary superiors. Your resistance is futile and unnecessary. Submit to Taurian guidance, and we shall elevate your civilization to heights you cannot imagine. Resist, and we will be forced to demonstrate our technological superiority." The response was immediate. Admiral Chen's expression hardened. "Marshal Vaughn, your threats have been noted. You have 30 seconds to alter course, or we will take defensive action." Tarek turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare a demonstration. Target one of their lunar installations. Minimal casualties, but make the display impressive." "Marshal," Sarah objected, "I strongly advise." "Execute," Tarek commanded. The ancestral right fired a single energy pulse toward the lunar colony. Before it could reach its target, a shimmering barrier appeared, absorbing the blast completely. "What?" Tarek stared in disbelief. Sarah's instruments blazed with warnings. "Marshal, they're locking weapons across our entire fleet." From seemingly empty space around them, hundreds of previously invisible platforms decloaked simultaneously. Earth ships, sleek, angular vessels that had been hidden in the asteroid belt, accelerated toward them. Admiral Chen's face reappeared on screen. "Marshal Vaughn, that was your only warning. You have committed an act of war against Earth. We will respond accordingly." The Earth defense grid activated. Not the primitive missiles or lasers the Taurians had expected, but weapons of terrifying sophistication. Graviton beams that bypassed their shields, quantum disruptors that targeted their engines with surgical precision. Evasive maneuvers. Tarek shouted as the first impacts rocked the ancestral right. "Return fire, full spread." The Taurian fleet responded, their weapons lashing out with energies that could shatter planets. But for every shot they fired, the Earth forces seemed to anticipate countermeasure systems, activating microseconds before impact. Within minutes, it became clear that the Taurians had made a catastrophic miscalculation. Earth wasn't the primitive world they had expected to easily dominate. Somehow, against all their projections, humanity had not only survived the cataclysm, but had evolved technologically at a pace the Taurians hadn't thought possible. As the ancestral right shuddered under another barrage, systems failing across the ship, Tarek stared at the tactical display in disbelief. A third of his fleet was already disabled, their supposedly superior technology neutralized by Earth's defenses. "Marshal," Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. "We must withdraw. We cannot win this engagement." Tarek's skin patterns pulsed with rage and confusion. How? How is this possible? They were supposed to be primitive. "Marshal, please," Sarah insisted as another impact threw them against the bulkheads. "Order the retreat. We need to regroup to understand what went wrong." Finally, Tarek nodded. "All vessels, emergency withdrawal. Activate jump drives. Fall back to Rally Point Sigma." As the remnants of the once proud Taurian fleet fled, disappearing into the folds of space they had so confidently emerged from hours earlier, Tarek Vaughn was left with the bitter knowledge that their long-awaited return to Earth had become a devastating miscalculation. They had left Earth as saviors 500,000 years ago, expecting to return as gods to a primitive world grateful for their guidance. Instead, they had found equals, perhaps even superiors, who had defended their home with a technological prowess the Taurians could barely comprehend. And now, they would have to face the unthinkable, the possibility that they had been wrong all along, that the greatest mistake in Taurian history might not have been leaving Earth, but returning to it. Reckoning of the Ancients. Rally Point Sigma, a barren moon orbiting a gas giant in a neighboring star system, had never been meant to host the entirety of the Taurian fleet. Yet here they were, licking their wounds, their pride shattered along with many of their finest ships. In the hastily established command center, Marshal Tarek Vaughn stood before the Ascendancy Council, their faces etched with shock and dismay. The holograms of 14 Taurian elders, the supreme governing body, flickered as they struggled to process the disaster. "Impossible," Elder Koros muttered for the third time. "Our projections were absolute. Earth's survivors could not have advanced so quickly. Yet they have," Tarek replied, his skin patterns subdued in shame. "Our fleet, the pinnacle of 500,000 years of Taurian evolution and technological development, was defeated in less than an hour." Commander Sarah Nix stepped forward, displaying the battle analytics. Their defensive systems predicted our attack patterns with 98.7% accuracy. They neutralized our quantum shields as if they'd been designed specifically to counter them. "How?" demanded Elder Vereen, her ancient face contorted with confusion. "The cataclysm destroyed their civilization entirely. Our ancestors left nothing behind that could have enabled this level of advancement." A heavy silence fell over the council. The unspoken truth hung in the air, something about their ancestral history, the very foundation of Taurian civilization, was fundamentally wrong. Tarek was about to respond when Lieutenant Carr burst into the chamber. "Marshal, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. They've tracked us to Sigma." The council chamber erupted in panic. If Earth forces could track them through interstellar jumps and attack, the Taurian civilization itself could be at risk. "Put it through," Tarek ordered, silencing the council with a gesture. Admiral Chen's face appeared once more, her expression stern but not triumphant. "Marshal Vaughn, the Earth Confederation Council has authorized me to establish communication. We will not attack your current position, though rest assured we could if we chose to." "What do you want?" Tarek asked, struggling to maintain his dignity. "Answers," Chen replied simply. "And to provide some in return. We're dispatching a diplomatic vessel to your location. Its only weapons are defensive. Will you receive our envoys peacefully?" The council members exchanged glances, but Tarek knew they had little choice. "We will." 24 hours later, the Earth diplomatic vessel Reconciliation arrived at Sigma. It was smaller than expected, elegant rather than imposing, escorted by only 2 military craft that maintained a respectful distance. In the Taurian flagship's Great Hall, Tarek and the council awaited their visitors. When the Earth delegation entered, led by Admiral Chen herself, The Taurians were struck by how human they appeared. Despite all their genetic enhancements and modifications, the Taurians had expected Earth humans to appear primitive by comparison. Instead, these visitors seemed remarkably similar, though without the luminescent skin patterns and slightly elongated proportions of Taurian physiology. Hi, Marshal Vaughn. Admiral Chen bowed slightly. I am accompanied by Dr. Marcus Okafor, our chief historian, and Ambassador Lion Wei. Tarek acknowledged them stiffly. You claim to have answers. Dr. Okafor stepped forward. He was an older man with kind eyes that belied a sharp intelligence. We've been analyzing your communications and technology since your arrival. Your claims about leaving Earth 500,000 years ago, during what you call the cataclysm, are particularly interesting. What of it? Elder Koros demanded. There was no civilization-ending cataclysm 500,000 years ago, Dr. Okafor stated flatly. At least, not one in our archaeological or geological record. The council chamber erupted again, voices raised in objection. Lies, shouted Elder Varane. Our entire history. May I continue? Dr. Okafor asked patiently, waiting for silence before proceeding. However, there was a significant event approximately 100,000 years ago, a series of asteroid impacts and volcanic eruptions that created a challenging period for early human development. He activated a holographic display showing archaeological timelines, and we do have records of a group leaving Earth around that time. They called themselves the Preservers, a breakaway faction who believed humanity was doomed and sought to continue our species elsewhere. Tarek felt dizzy. That's impossible. Our records clearly state. Your records appear to have been altered. Ambassador Wei interjected gently. We believe it was deliberate, a way for your ancestors to justify their eventual return and conquest of Earth. Commander Sarah, who had been analyzing the Earth data, spoke up. Marshal, their geological evidence is compelling. The timeline discrepancy is too significant to dismiss. Dr. Okafor continued. We believe your ancestors' generation ships experienced time dilation effects they didn't fully understand. What felt like a journey of perhaps a few thousand years to them was actually much longer in objective time. When they established your colony, they likely adjusted historical records to maintain authority, claiming they were the saviors of humanity rather than a splinter group. The revelation struck Tarek like a physical blow. Everything, the entire foundation of Taurian society, had been built on a lie. They weren't Earth's saviors returning to guide their primitive cousins. They were simply one branch of humanity that had evolved separately. If this is true, Tarek said slowly, then how did Earth advance so rapidly? Our ancestors' projections, even accounting for the timeline discrepancy, couldn't have been so wrong. Admiral Chen smiled for the first time. Because we weren't alone, Marshal. 50,000 years ago, humanity made contact with the Aldebarani Alliance, a collective of 11 spacefaring species. We joined them, learned from them, and in some areas, surpassed them. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Not only had Earth survived without Taurian intervention, but they had joined a galactic community while the Taurians had remained isolated, believing themselves to be the pinnacle of human evolution. Elder Koros finally spoke, his voice trembling. Why are you telling us this? Why not simply destroy us after our attack? Because despite everything, Ambassador Wei said, we are still human, different branches of the same tree. And, she hesitated, because we need your help. That caught everyone's attention. Admiral Chen's expression turned grave. 3 years ago, we detected something at the edge of explored space, an extragalactic presence that has since been consuming entire star systems. The Aldebarani call them the Void Swarm. Nothing in known space has been able to stop their advance. She activated another hologram showing a dark, amorphous mass engulfing stars. Your quantum technology, particularly your drive systems, operates on principles our scientists haven't fully mastered. Combined with our defensive capabilities, we might stand a chance. Tarek exchanged glances with Sarah and the council members. You're proposing an alliance? After we just tried to conquer you. We're proposing survival, Admiral Chen corrected. For all humanity, whether Earthborn or Taurian. The gravity of the situation settled over the chamber. Their glorious return to Earth had been based on historical lies, their supposed superiority proven false in battle, and now they were being offered not subjugation but partnership, against a threat that endangered everyone. Tarek studied the Earth delegation. He saw no deception in their faces, no hidden agenda in their proposal. Just the pragmatic assessment that two branches of humanity stood a better chance together than apart. The Taurian ascendancy has always claimed to act in humanity's best interest, Tarek said slowly. It seems we now have an opportunity to prove that claim true, rather than merely repeating our ancestors' words. He stepped forward and extended his hand, a gesture their historical records indicated was an ancient Earth custom for sealing agreements. Admiral Chen, it appears that our return to Earth was indeed a mistake, but perhaps a fortunate one. The Taurian ascendancy accepts your proposal of alliance. As Chen clasped his hand, Tarek felt something shift within him, a weight of inherited purpose giving way to something new. They had left Earth 500,000 years ago, believing themselves to be humanity's saviors. They had returned expecting to be its masters. Now they would have to learn to be its partners. And facing the darkness spreading at the galaxy's edge, that might be exactly what humanity needed to survive. As the newly formed Earth-Taurian coalition prepared for the coming storm, Marshal Tarek Vaughn stood at the observation deck of the Ancestral Rite, watching Earth technicians working alongside his crew to integrate their defensive systems. Commander Sarah joined him, her expression thoughtful. It's not the homecoming our ancestors promised us. No, Tarek agreed, his skin patterns pulsing with a calm he hadn't felt since their arrival in the Sol system. It's better. Better? Sarah questioned. Our entire history was a fabrication. We're not the superior evolution of humanity we believed ourselves to be. Tarek watched as an Earth engineer explained a concept to a group of Taurian technicians, their initial stiffness giving way to genuine curiosity. Our ancestors left Earth believing they were saving humanity, he said. Whether they lied about the timeline or simply became lost in it doesn't change their core intention. And now, facing this void swarm, we may yet fulfill that purpose, not as conquerors, but as equals. Beyond the viewport, Earth shone, not as a prize to be claimed, but as a sister civilization with its own journey, its own triumphs and wisdom. The two branches of humanity, separated by time and distance, but united by common origin, and now common purpose, prepared to face the darkness together. Perhaps, Tarek mused, returning to Earth wasn't a mistake after all, just not the triumph we expected. Sarah's skin patterns brightened slightly. We came seeking to reclaim our past. Instead, we found a future. As the combined fleet prepared for departure, Earth and Taurian ships flying together toward the oncoming threat, Tarek reflected that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the admission that you've been traveling in the wrong direction all along. They had left Earth 500,000 years ago, seeking to preserve humanity. They had returned seeking to rule it. Now, they would fight alongside it, for a future neither branch of humanity could secure alone.